Hi. Thank you for waiting. We had a few little hiccups getting things going, so I appreciate your patience. I'm Deborah Bernagosi, co-founder and executive director of Signal Culture.
I'm Alan Riley, and I'm a Signal Culture artist in residence this week.
Yeah, and you're also a two-time alum before now.
Yeah, I came here in 2016 and did a collaborative residency with Matt Underwood, and I came back in 2019 by myself.
Yeah, and both of those times were in our old studio in Owego. So this is your first time in Colorado.
That's correct. Well, for this residency.
Well, for the residency, yes. He's also been to Telluride because he's fancy, but first time for the residency. So yeah, you're an old hand at Signal Culture.
Yep.
So tell me about what you've been working on this week.
I've mostly been working with the Earn Video Lab, which is, now of course I've made it do very little, but yeah, I've just been exploring this video synth and making images using the pattern source and the key, all the different keyers and colorizers on the device.
Yeah, and Eliza, we have Eliza Miller on camera. Hi, Eliza. So if you want to come around and so you can get a close-up of the Hearn so people can see what we're talking about here. And so I will just aim it down. Great. So this is the Hearn Video Lab. It's kind of like an electronics kit for video synthesis. And so it's got a pattern generator over here, a colorizer over here, a mixer, some control voltage stuff going on down on the bottom. And this one was actually owned by Judd Yalcott, an early film and video artist who also collaborated a lot with Nam June Paik. And when he passed away, his wife, Peg, sold these to Dave Jones, who has generously done work getting them in better condition. It's like a forest inside there, so it's pretty amazing. He was able to get in and do repairs, but he's Dave, so there you go. And Dave has loaned them to us. So these are a real favorite of artists. Yeah, and then we come back a little bit so we can get, there we go.
Mm-hmm. I didn't know that. That's great to know the history of this particular device. I didn't know that. Yeah, that's really cool.
Yeah. So, and what is it about the Hearn that appeals to you?
Because it's sort of like you said, it's sort of like kind of like a do-it-yourself, build your own video mixer tool. So I think it's interesting to just like see these different signal operations sort of on a more granular level and kind of construct the different operations or white patterns or pattern generators, like do all of that sort of semi from scratch and kind of see it come together that way.
Yeah, and you got it going into the MX50 mixer.
Yeah.
Over here.
Yeah.
And so what kind of source footage do you have going in, or is it all generated from the Hearn pattern generator?
Well, what I've mostly been doing is just using the pattern generator in the Hearn. Right now there's some like glitchy non-sync video coming from a camera over there. So, right before the stream started, I, of course, destroyed all of the beautiful video art that I've been making this week, and so there's just a black and white static image for you now. But you'll have to, if you check out the Signal Culture Instagram, you can see some clips of the things that I've been doing, which are really But
and he has not destroyed it in terms of it's gone. He just meant he changed some settings and now it looks different, which is a thing that happens because of all the machines in here, the Hearn is kind of alive. And so you kind of almost look at it and it changes. So.
Yeah. So here's just that. That's actually kind of nice.
It is kind of nice. There. That's one of those things like you see in horror movies now, because for some reason analog technology equals horror. I'm not sure what that's about.
Yeah, and so using the MX50 with this kind of a really noisy signal can be nice, because then you can use the strobe effect, kind of slow that down a bit. I wanted to get the feedback back in here, but let's see which channel I have it on. Looks like it might be that one. Yeah, this is exactly what this is like. I kind of figure it's like having a conversation verbally is a very different mental space than finding the right. So like this is what like what I mostly am doing in this residency is this sort of, I'm thinking of it in terms of like going on hikes. So there's so many different signal pathways that have different consequences or different sorts of relations that get created. So by choosing one sort of starting point and then building a set of connections and observing the results and then making small changes, kind of seeing where the path takes me. And then when it gets to be, when I get to the end of that sort of, that moment, then I'll just kind of unplug everything and take a break, think about what to try next, and then come back in and spend another 2 or 3 hours building a patch and seeing where it takes me.
Yeah, is that always how you've worked, or has your process evolved over the years?
I would say that for the video synthesis approach, definitely, there's always some kind of starting idea or like a seed idea. So the first thing that I ever wanted to do is to just connect video game systems to the Sandian image processor in Alfred, and that got me started kind of like thinking about what you could do with like interactive live video. Lately, I've been thinking about a science fiction film that I'm interested in making that's about like how physical materials become communication media. Like people transform people transform physical materials into ways of connecting with each other. So we transform physical materials into communication channels. And so I've been thinking about that both in relation to video synthesis, but also social interaction, and also the use of like other kinds of physical materials. So that's been kind of what I've had in the back of my mind during this residency.
Okay.
Sort of making, and then I'm making these pieces that kind of look like they're ambiguous, like maybe they're a physical object, maybe it's a piece of clay, maybe it's a brain scan, which is it's a comment that Eliza made, and sort of like thinking through this world of this possible film as I'm going on these signal hikes.
Yeah, I like that. And is this a thing that you're doing for your PhD?
Yeah, it would be so I'm a PhD student at UC Santa Cruz in the Film and Digital Media department, and my dissertation is I'm just putting together the proposal still right now.
I love the name you picked.
Yes, my dissertation is titled The Imagination Synthesizer, and so it's really about thinking about synthesis, not just in terms of audiovisual synthesis and electronics, but synthesis in terms of all of these kinds of channels, in terms of communication channels, reciprocal transformation, relationality, and thinking through that in terms of both moving image creation, but also kind of constructed situations and imagination.
Okay.
So I'm doing some things that combine audiovisual synthesis and improvised narrative filmmaking.
Okay, great. And are you thinking of this as like a feature length or short? Or
the way that I've been thinking about it is that it's going to it might be a combination of different projects, but this particular film that I've been thinking about, it will be sort of like a serialized thing. So there would be different workshops that take place and that contribute to an emerging story.
Okay.
So it's sort of like a soap opera in that
sense. Interesting.
Yeah.
And I remember I actually wrote on our Patreon the first time I remember meeting you. Jason and I were hanging out in at Alfred when he was a grad student, and you were walking through doing a tour.
Oh yeah.
And I think at that time you were making horror films. Is that right?
Oh yeah, that's true. Yeah, great. Yeah, I saw it. Yeah, earlier on, like the first art projects that I got involved with were making horror films and fantasy movies. Yeah, so I did 2 films, The Grateful Undead, which I co-created with Patrick May, and Doomed, which is a fantasy film that has kind of it's like large puppetry, sort of Henson-inspired puppet effects and other practical effects. But that kind of like, and I always think back to that. I don't think of video signal processing and signal processing as creating special effects, but I really was always fascinated with practical effects, and I see the relationship between live image synthesis and manipulation, and that kind of like creating a practical effect for a film, to like using latex or all these other kinds of materials that we were using in clay to create these creatures.
Well, because I do weird video, documentary photography, and fiber art, I was trying to figure out what's the thing that links those, and I realized that it's an experiential way of creating. And I think, with the practical effects versus other ways of doing effects, it's also like you're experiencing it versus just representing it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, there's a moment that takes place. There's some kind of physical material interaction, and I guess this kind of is this is sort of like a film thing too, like the optical event, like see like the relationship between the light, the camera, and the eye. But I think that's true for all kinds of art practice. So you can take that kind of thinking that was sort of developed in a film context, but then use that as a lens for viewing anything else. So I definitely am influenced by that way of thinking too, of just like the kind of the relationship between the event and the moment of the creation of the moving image and the moment in which it's displayed and experienced by others, and there being some kind of physical continuity that runs through that. So, and then in terms of like artificial intelligence, which is a big topic now, it's not like interchangeable, like generating an image one way versus another way. I think that those differences will become more obviously important because of the kind of image synthesis, simulative image synthesis stuff that's happening now.
So how did you get into all this in the first place?
Well, there were a few different threads. Like making the films was one major part of it. And I also, I designed project-based learning programming curriculum at Beam Center, which is based in Brooklyn. And when I was starting out with that, I did a lot of video production workshops with kids. And one of the things that pushed me toward live video and analog video was that when I was making these like narrative fantasy movies with children, I really didn't like the bottleneck of post-production, and kind of like narrowed it down to just a couple of children working on that part of it. So I started to look into ways where we could make production and post-production one activity. So for example, like just using live cameras, but I was even doing things where we would have a VCR, and then we would just like change which camera was plugged into the VCR.
Oh wow!
Stuff like that, because I didn't know about any of that kind of equipment. So I sort of discovered it through need, actually.
Oh yeah, actually, you were telling me a fascinating story the other day about. That you hadn't come across mixers.
Yeah, exactly. That's the thing. So then I like the filmmaking work and the youth workshop, video production workshop stuff. That's some of the work that I put into my portfolio when I originally applied to Alfred in 2010. And then when I got there, I learned all about this stuff from Per Boda Andrew Deutsch, and all the great professors there.
Yeah.
And friends as well. You know, Eric Souther was there, and Morgan Higby Flowers taught me a lot about video feedback.
Mm-hmm.
So I started to connect it all together.
Yeah.
At that point.
Yeah. And then you're wearing your a shirt that I'm a little jealous of, and hopefully we'll be able to get one.
Video Freak.
Yeah. So can you talk about that project? Because you worked on that some at your previous residency.
Yeah. So.
And I put some stills from that in the Patreon.
Okay.
Post,
Nice.
So.
Yeah. So So Video Freak goes all the way back to these like early Sandine experiments. Actually, there's a friend of mine in Alfred who had a Super Nintendo, Michael Chernoff.
Oh yeah.
And so it was his Super Nintendo, and so we plugged the Super Nintendo into the Sandine, and that got me very, that was the beginning of my synthesis journey. But I continued to experiment with that, and I did a few pieces with Super Mario Brothers, where I was like blue screening, keying out the sky.
Mm-hmm.
There's the blue sky, so you see yourself playing the game, or doing setups with multiple video game consoles going into mixers and creating this sort of meta game of mixing feedback into the games, multiple games happening at the same time. So this anarchic approach to video gameplay. And I collaborated with Mark Kleback who invited me. He was building independent arcade cabinets with artists and invited me to collaborate with him. So we made Video Freak, which was a new game that I developed in Unity, which is extremely minimalist, like 2D shooter. But the point of it is to act as like your hand in front of the camera, kind of manipulating the video feedback.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really just a black and white game where you're kind of swishing around in the feedback. And there's also some potentiometers on the control panel for the cabinet that are tied into an Archer video processor that's in a feedback loop with a Videonics MX Pro.
Cool.
So there's that, like, it's kind of it. So the arcade cabinet is a way of playing a video game in conjunction with this video synthesis or video gameplay as a modulation source for video synthesis.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of taking these two idioms and combining them.
Is there a beginning or end of a game, or is it just sort of on all the time?
There's a title screen. So
Okay.
part of designing our games for arcades is that you have to set it up so that somebody can walk up, figure out what to do without a lot of time.
Sure.
So if you walk up to the cabinet and do anything, the game starts.
Okay.
And then you play with it for a while. And then if you walk away, it will time out.
Okay.
So there's no way to complete the game, though. It's a kind of an exploratory experience.
Uh-huh.
But there were times like we would bring the game to this the Music and Games Fest, MagFest in DC, and that's like a 4-day rave basically. That just there's continuous access to the show floor,
Mm-hmm.
and there were times when people would just hang out playing that game for hours,
Nice.
all night long.
Wow.
So the gameplay ranges from like 15 seconds to like 2 hours or something.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that must have been really exciting to see people getting into it like that too.
Yeah. Well, that's the nice thing too, is that it's gonna go into storage now because it needs some repairs, but it's been operational for 10 years almost.
That's amazing.
Yeah, and most of that time it's been available to be played in public. So that's a really special project for me for that reason, just because people get to see it.
Yeah.
So it means a lot to me. It's been on display at Wonderville for a few years,
Mm-hmm.
and then it had a run at the Museum of the Moving Image last year.
Okay, and Wonderville's in which town?
That's in Brooklyn,
Okay.
in New York. Yeah,
Okay,
it's
cool.
in Bushwick, Bed-Stuy
Mm-hmm.
area.
Cool.
Mhm.
Okay, and you worked on the sound for that at your early residence.
Yeah. There you had that Surge modular system, and so
that was on loan, and then we don't have it anymore. But
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah, but it sounded great, and I made this funny musical pattern with that, like this sort of like walking bass kind of thing.
Uh-huh.
And I was like, this needs to be, I didn't even know what it was going to be used for yet, but it kind of sounded like the music in Dr. Mario, this kind of like this peppy, like cyber jazz thing. And so I kind of held on to that, and eventually it became the soundtrack for Video Freak.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah, it's interesting when people come here. I think that people who come without a specific agenda often do a lot better, because if you have an end goal in mind, it can be really distracting where you're trying to achieve a specific vision versus playing.
Yeah.
And so
That's true. I think you're right. Because every time I've come here, all the 3 times I've come here, I've come with an intention, but then it just doesn't really it doesn't work that way because of this like hike approach, I guess. And that's the thing that makes the most sense. But it was really nice to have the first residency here with Matt Underwood, because he was so familiar with this methodology from the Experimental Television Center and also Alfred. But he, working with him a bit, he was working on his application for his MFA at that time. So he was in and out of the studio, but like I learned a lot from Matt about like how to just explore and not filter out your curiosity with your intentions.
Yeah. And unfortunately, Matt has passed. We all miss him. Do you have any favorite memories from your residency with him?
Matt was just so funny. So we just had a beautiful kind of way of communicating, and I loved being with Matt. So
I
don't have a specific story.
He was with us a few times, and we have this crazy photo somewhere of him with like gold underpants. Is that during your joint residency? Or?
No.
Yeah, it's a really fun photo. I gotta find it. But in the studio in Owego.
We didn't do any performance stuff. But one thing I haven't been doing actually, that this isn't like a funny story or anything, but just like a Matt thing, is that Matt was really into like the kind of like orbital obsession, sort of like have the camera in the studio and like have the studio view of the working process visible in the videos. And I tend to not do that as much, but I think about it because Matt was always like, no, we have to have this camera. And like, he would just like set up the camera and point it at us, and then we would be on screen too.
Interesting.
So like, maybe I'll try to do some of that before the end of the residency, just because like, I really like having just these recordings, but then it doesn't, if you don't see the process a little bit, it can become decontextualized. But Okay.
And how do you feel it's different being here than when you were in Owego?
It's a bit more social because there's folks in the gallery, and the other funny thing in Owego, there was the bedroom was connected to the studio. So you would like wake up and then turn on the system and then start making video.
And literally
pieces.
Not even a door in between, just like a big 8-foot opening in between. So it was always just sort of calling you.
Exactly. So I mean, that So this, maybe we could say this one is more like healthier because I'm going outside occasionally. And I'm interacting with people, and it's really great. And Loveland is a great town. That's, I would say that like the that's the main difference, is just like exposure to other artists in this space, and just more social interaction in general.
And let's see, does anyone have any questions for Matt? I see we have a few
for
people.
Alan.
All right, I'm so sorry. That would be a whole other type of.
We can do that. We can do that too. That would be a good show.
Good Lord.
It's because I had all of the kind of like ontology kind of fuzzy video playing.
Alan, does anyone have any questions? And I have plenty of things I can talk about. Give people a minute to type if they want to. Thank you for joining us, even if you don't have questions. You are at what point in your program now?
The PhD, I completed all the coursework and I just submitted my prospectus. So if you want to know about the logistics of a PhD, you have to take, for those of you who have not done this yet, you take courses, you're just in college, and then you have a bunch of exams that take, between 6 months to a year to complete. And then you, after about 3 years of all of that, they say, yes, you are eligible to to pursue a PhD, and you go from being a PhD student to candidate. So I am now a PhD candidate, and I probably have a couple more years left.
Yeah. So, and your dissertation will be both written and an exhibition?
Yeah. So at UC Santa Cruz in the film department, it's a practice-based PhD. So they acknowledge creative practice as research. So I'll be doing my creative projects in conjunction with a written dissertation.
Okay.
And the written dissertation is sort of like a theoretical framework for looking at synthesis from this perspective that I'm describing. And so there's some historical work that I'm doing, looking at Fluxus, Situationist International stuff, and then some video art histories and computer histories. And I'm particularly interested in the role that video played in the Douglas Engelbart Mother of All demos, because they were sort of partly creating this sort of impression of an interactive video-based computer system by combining their operating system prototype with video mixers. And so they were sort of bringing the practice of computation into social space using video. And so that kind of idea of what role video plays in culture is the topic of the dissertation. And so that's like one of my examples of the imagination synthesizer. So they used the imagination synthesizer to bring computation into social life.
Yeah. Cool. Is there anything we haven't covered that you'd love to talk about?
I mean, this is a pretty wide-ranging conversation. So thanks for the questions. I'm sure that when I look at this later, I will regret and realize all sorts of things. But thank you very much.
Okay. Well, thank you, people, for joining us, and thank you, Al.
Thank you.
And
thank you,
see
Signal
you
Culture.
later.